Okay, now we're moving on to elasticity. Now, full disclosure time, I got the idea for this from a terrific website created by a University of Arizona economics professor. So, why does this professor, who knows a lot more about economics than I do, think that Beyonce is partly singing about the elasticity of demand? Let's listen. Well, the guy isn't irreplaceable, right? She can have another him in a minute. Or, to use your economics vocabulary, there are lots of available substitutes. So when the price of a good goes up, when this guy gets to be more trouble, her demand for the original good goes down fast. In other words, when it comes to men, Beyonce is very price sensitive. What about me? Well, after 35 years of marriage, my husband would frankly have to get a whole lot grumpier. In other words, he'd have to raise the price of putting up with him by a lot before I decided to dump him for an alternative product. For one thing, there are not a whole lot of substitutes lining up to replace him. So on to elasticity. In my experience, elasticity as a topic makes students grumpy, probably because, alas, there is math involved. And we are going to do some math, or I should say some more math, because I know you've already tackled some elasticity problems. But what I really want you to focus on is why guessing right or wrong about consumer response to price changes can make a big difference to the success or failure of an enterprise. So, most of the rest of this class is going to be taken up by a case study, specifically a New York Times article about what happened when New York City tried to raise a lot more money for the Department of Parks and Recreation by raising tennis court fees. Tennis, rich people play tennis, right? New York is filled with rich people. Sounds like a good idea. But first, let me give you a quick review of some aspects of elasticity and talk about one way of looking at it graphically and one way of measuring it mathematically. We're going to get to more math next class and then move on to more applications. So your textbook has a more mathematical definition of elasticity, and as I said, we're going to get there. But this is where I want to start. Elasticity is the response of consumers to a change in price. If it's a big response, then if the quantity change is large relative to the price change, then a good is price elastic. If the consumer response is relatively small, then it's price inelastic. It's as simple as that. As I said, we will add the numbers, but first let's add the pictures. Good one with inelastic demand has a steeply sloped demand curve. You should really get to the point where you can look at a curve, or at least a period on a curve, and say that's probably inelastic. Yes, the quantity demanded goes down as the price goes up. Remember, that's the law of demand. But the price goes up a lot, while the quantity doesn't really change all that much. So it's an inelastic good. The demand graph on the right, by contrast, has a much flatter slope. What this means is that a change in price produces a bigger change in quantity. We're going to add a formula next class, but frankly, I think the picture is easier. And what I really want to focus on today, and what's much more important for you to remember than a formula you really need calculus to do properly, is what elasticity has to do with the amount of money that businesses ring up in their cash registers, or, to use our economics vocabulary, what it has to do with total revenue. So let's look at good one. For good one, a price increase from $15 to $20 brings more money into the cash register. It raises total revenue. For good two, a price increase from $15 to $20 cuts revenues from $1,800 to $1,000. Now, don't worry about unitary elasticity yet. Just stop and think of how important it is to know whether cutting the price of your product or service is going to bring in more or less revenue. And even though we will throw elasticity formulas at students all the time, in fact, businesses don't usually know the exact elasticity of demand for their product until they raise or lower their prices. They conduct various studies to try to find out, but there are sometimes pleasant or unpleasant surprises. And I'm going to stop here and let you look at the real world example I just mentioned. What you need to remember as you read the article and take your reading quiz is, first, total revenue equals price times quantity. It's a simple multiplication problem. P times Q. Goods are elastic if a price cut raises total revenue, or if a price increase reduces total revenue. Again, think of the logic. Don't just try to memorize that. Goods are inelastic if a price cut reduces total revenue and a price increase raises total revenue. Now, that leaves aside the question of how much total revenue response there is. That's for you to figure out. The quiz is up in Moodle under day 2.2. I want you to read for 5 minutes, and you can begin answering questions if you'd like. And then you have another 10 minutes to finish the quiz in consultation with your partner. There is an extra credit problem that you have to answer in an essay format. Just type in the answer. I have given you a URL that might help.